That I wake up every single day realizing that we got to take care of 400 families, and it starts with us in pre-con. If we're not bringing in the bids, it doesn't matter how good anybody else is down the chain. None of it matters, if we're not bringing in the work, and that can be a burden, but it's a beautiful burden to get to carry. I've been told that I got fired because I wasn't pretty enough, which I respectfully disagree with that.
John, thanks for coming on board today. Want to get to know a little bit more about the John that hits the gym and.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, man. I'm really excited. I haven't been pushing the gym as much as I should, but yeah, man, I'm excited to dive into it and talk about
where it started, man, where it all started. What high school did you go to?
So I actually grew up in Wylie and then eventually moved to Farmersville for high school. So we'd moved back and forth between Wylie and Farmersville a couple of times, but that's where I graduated out east of McKinney, 2011, and then eventually went to school at Texas Tech and was out there for about 6 years.
6 years. Did you have any aspirations before then to go to college, or was it just kind of like?
I always wanted to go to college. I had an uncle that was a professor that I always looked up to, and he was like an art professor at Virginia Commonwealth University for a long time. And so, yeah, I always wanted to go to college. I wasn't quite sure what for the longest time, but I knew that I did want to go. I just didn't know where. It really wasn't even until probably my last semester in high school that I was like, man, I need to pick somewhere to go. I was originally looking at going to just maybe calling college, staying close to home, and then I had some friends that were going to go to Texas Tech, and at that point, to be honest, I'd never even heard of Tech. I wasn't that big into college sports at the time. Family were big Longhorns fans, but that's about it.
I have to ask, did you ever play football?
Yes. Yeah, I played in I guess it would have been 7th and 8th grade. And then I skipped my freshman year. We actually went to state and won the state championship that year, which was awesome. I played my sophomore year in high school, played a little bit of JV, but that was about it. I didn't really like it as much at the time. I didn't really care much for lifting weights and stuff back then. It just felt like everybody else wanted me to do this thing, and it wasn't really what I was that interested in. When it's somebody else's idea, sometimes it's a little bit harder to buy in, right? At that point, it really wasn't something that
And that's why I ask about, your path going into college, because sometimes it's like, you have to go to college. It's a must, right? Mm-hmm. And nowadays, there's just so many trades and other things, other paths that you can take to get to where you want or need to be, right? So you went to college, said 6 years. What did you end up getting your degree in?
So eventually I graduated with a degree in university studies, which you pretty much combine 3 minors for your major. So mine were organizational leadership, communication studies, and then political science was the last one. So political science was probably my favorite at the time because I loved history and I loved kind of understanding government a little bit more, things like that, and took some really interesting classes.
So there's definitely no numbers involved.
Well, so when I first started in school being in college, I actually went for computer science. And then I met some of the people that were in the program, and I was like, this is just not for me, man. Nobody here's having any fun. There'd be days before anybody would smile again. I just didn't want anything to do with it. So after my first semester, I was like, I can't do this. I went into general business, and that was kind of too much of a swing the other way, where those people were just too careless and not that interested in learning and stuff, and were just in college to be in college. Yeah. And so I tried going back to engineering and kind of bounced around until eventually, actually it was probably 2015 or 2016, I actually got academically suspended because I just wasn't going to class. I was dealing with some personal issues and really just struggling, man. I was 5 hours away from home, bouts of depression and stuff like that. And so I was kind of in a little bit of a rut, but it wasn't until I actually moved back here that eventually I went back and finished my degree online.
Yeah. But you finished, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's what matters. What was one of your first jobs straight out of college?
So technically, this was my very first job while I was still in college. I would say my very first career position was working here. So before that, I had worked for Market Street in the meat market, and then I worked at Chick-fil-A, breading chicken and stuff in the kitchen and running the breading station and things like that, which was honestly very humbling because before I started working there, to be honest, I had this idea in my head, like, I'm going to go out and do big things. And that means that I should have this big job already. And you kind of fall victim to society's expectations that people have of, like, you should be a multimillionaire and you should be conquering the world by the time you're 22. All these super unrealistic things cause you to kind of take a step back. Like when I started working at Chick-fil-A, I was working alongside people that were much older than me, and they just worked hard every day. They didn't get paid much money, and they just showed up, and it was just kind of like, wow, like, if they take this that serious, I need to take something serious. It was this realization that I just hadn't really tried, like, even with college to that point, I was just very
complacent, maybe.
Yeah, man. I struggled to pay attention. I just was uninterested. Again, it was like I had this feeling like I should be doing more. Mm-hmm. And the truth was I had the capability of doing more. I just wasn't doing more.
You needed that drive.
Yeah.
That drive.
Yeah.
Well, that's life, right? That's life where you have to really, like, get that reality check. Reality is you got to pay bills. Reality is, we got to make a living. We got to make a career. And started at Moss. What was your first job here at Moss?
So I was pretty much one of our very first receptionists, if not the very first receptionist.
What they call it, the lady receptionist?
Yeah, the front desk lady.
Front desk lady. You're a front desk lady.
Yeah, so I've been told that I got fired because I wasn't pretty enough, which I respectfully disagree with that.
Respect.
But no, I just wasn't ever up front. I was supposed to, take care of the mail and make sure that I was up there when people got to the building and all that kind of stuff. And I was just so interested in what we were doing. I'd mentioned, working at Chick-fil-A being very humbling. It was kind of one of those things where whenever I moved here from Lubbock, I had made a commitment to myself, like, hey, I'm no more steps backwards. Like, it's only forward from here. And it's this realization, nobody's coming to save you, which was very helpful for me. It was like, okay, well, I got to work hard here. I got to figure out what we do. I got to make myself valuable. I mean, from the very beginning, man, I was just asking questions like, what are wet utilities? I remember our old chief estimator, he came to me and he was like, hey, I need you to run a takeoff on this deal. And I was like, 10-4. He walked away. I'm like, what's a takeoff? He handed a set of plans and I need to run a takeoff. I didn't know what that meant. So I started talking to my dad and my dad started showing me stuff. That's kind of how it all started, was just asking questions, being present, and eventually I got to become our first estimating coordinator. That was the fall of 2017. Not long after that, I think it was August of 2018, I got promoted to estimator and then eventually lead estimator. And then in October this last year, I became chief estimator.
Nice. Did you realize what you were going into, though, at that time, or you just kind of like, I'm filling a role?
Yeah, at that point I had an idea. I mean, I was already kind of fulfilling those duties before I got promoted and put in that position and given that title. Yeah. My title before that was assistant project manager, which I didn't really do anything project management related. Yeah. But when I came in, the company was in its infancy. It was in the first 9-10 months of business. And so there was no procedure yet for everything.
It wasn't any right or wrong at the time.
Yeah, right? It was just, here's a person we want to have on board. We're going to give them a title, and eventually the rest of it will work itself out, and that's exactly what happened. So there was a need for somebody to be in that role, and it just kind of made sense. I was already kind of helping out with the pre-con team, and at the time my dad was on the pre-con team. He was an estimator, and so it just made sense for me to step in there. But I knew even back then, again, I was like, okay, well, nobody's going to come do it for you. You got to go ask questions. You got to get this stuff figured out. You got to go put yourself in a spot to learn. What helped with my growth a ton, man, was just if somebody was working on something, especially if I wasn't doing anything, I was going to say, hey, can I sit in here while you work up this estimate? And sometimes it's not even, I'm not going to bother you. I just want to sit in and just kind of observe. That makes a big difference, just taking the time to watch people do what they do.
But it also takes someone that wants it, right? You got to want it. You got to have that drive. You got to ask the questions, right? As a coordinator, I don't know entirely, what the scope is when it comes to a coordinator. Where you think the coordinator starts becoming the estimator and building relationships, or where do you think that falls into play?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that that's absolutely where it starts. I mean, from the beginning, one thing I struggled with earlier on was definitely kind of more of the small talk with other people and kind of getting comfortable engaging with our customers and our clients, like really making sure that I'm being a good partner. And that starts with picking up the phone saying, hey, unfortunately, we can't get to this bid right now. Whenever you're the estimating coordinator, you're handling all these bid invites. So you're getting a ton of solicitations in from people you've never heard of before, never met before, all this kind of stuff. And a lot of times you're the one that's having to make the phone call saying, hey, we're not going to be able to get to this opportunity, or we are going to get to this opportunity. And hey, we may need a little bit more time. And so that was a big difference. It's just you start having all these people that you're reaching out. From there, I think anybody that's coming up the ranks, it's important to meet people and talk with our customers and just make sure that they know that you're there and that you want to help. And I was telling one of the guys earlier today, he was one of our estimators was looking into a bid, and I was like, man, you got to just pick up the phone and call them and talk to them and say, hey, especially if we're early, reach out and
build that relationship, right?
Yeah, man. Because it's important. Like the best clients we have are the ones that were true partnerships. Like I've got a relationship at a certain level of the company. Garrett's got a relationship. Parker's got a relationship. Everybody should have a relationship on the project management side, on the estimating side, on the operations side. We should all have somebody that we're talking to and trying to get to know. And it's so much more than just the work. At the end of the day, we're all human beings trying to take care of our families. And when you look at it like that, it makes it a lot easier to show up and to be intentional and to reach out and make that connection when you're being genuine about it.
Are there any client, we know that we have that relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one day they'll take us out hunting, right? So still waiting for that day.
Yeah, right.
Still waiting for that day.
No, I think honestly, some of the big ones come to mind is Pogue. Pogue's a huge one. Panado as well. Evans. There's some that have come and gone, and that's another thing too. You just got to get comfortable with that. It's like, I could have a good relationship with somebody if their operations team isn't taking care of our operations team, or their PM team isn't taking care of our PM team, or vice versa. If they're not being good partners, then you kind of have to accept that's just the reality of the business.
Yeah, because y'all are just a piece of the pie, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a chain effect, right? You have to initiate that relationship, and then you have to rely on your other team members to execute. Let's knock this park out that John worked on. And it just keeps going back, right? It goes from here to here. Finished projects, right? Project.
Another big customer that comes to mind is Arco Murray. They're another one too, where it's across the board. We've been very fortunate that we've been awarded their Vendor of the Year twice, 2 years in a row, and that hasn't come without its difficulties and challenges on projects, but that's, they know that they can give us a call and pre-con team that we're going to take care of them. We're going to get the bid turned around. We're going to give them a complete scope of work. And then when it comes to operations team, that's what I think is so unique about our company is like that we've made this transition, and it hasn't always been perfect, but I feel like we do such a better job right now than we probably even did a year ago at I know that I can rely on the project management team and the operations team to see this thing through all the way to the end, and we can communicate, and there's no hard feelings anymore. No sort of like you coming to me talking about some of the safety stuff on these data centers. Like that stuff matters, and it's the relationships are so important internally and externally. If you're not getting that feedback from our customer, how can you relay that to me to make sure that we're taking care of the bids appropriately?
Yeah, you got to have the info for the job, right? Mm-hmm. And the more information you have, the better that we can execute, all the complexities of the project, right? What are the requirements here and here, right? Mm-hmm. Something as simple as depths. We want to give you guys what you need to execute. Taking that and pushing it into the other projects as well, right? That y'all bid. Awesome process that Moss has built. We want to be competitive. We want to be the top dogs, right? Yep. We want to be the top dogs.
Everything starts in our department. We get to see these jobs well before they ever wind up in the hands of a project manager or that the stuff's actually going in the ground, which is pretty unique that we're looking at a ton of projects a year. Let's say that if in order to hit a certain revenue goal, we have to bid 10 times that amount, typically on average. That's about construction average, about 10% hit ratio, which means that if we're chasing 180 million, 200 million in revenue, that means you got to bid $1.8 to $2 billion worth of stuff, which means that's a lot of bids. But it starts with us and starts those relationships and having good customers, good clients. You want somebody you can rely on to give you good feedback, and that doesn't come without. I had a customer last week that just called and said, "Hey, we're really chasing this job. How can you help me?" And it's like, okay, no problem. Here's the amount we've got to play with here. I want to help you out. I want to give you a discount, And she wouldn't have made that phone call had we not had a good relationship and her been comfortable knowing that even if it's not in writing right now, that I'm going to keep my word and make sure that we take care of that relationship, and that when they're chasing a job, that's where we can help them, Those relationships matter.
Help me help you.
Yep.
Right? Help me help you. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the guys down in the field, right, because our guys are big, right? They're a big portion of why we're here today, right? Do you think they realize the impact the estimating team has on them?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I would assume not, but I'm really not sure. I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize it. I think, we have we're very close in our department. So when people walk around the office and they see us, they tend to see, we might be throwing some dice or whatever it is, and we're kind of laughing together as a group, cutting up. But, a lot of people don't see the midnight, bids going out and all the times where you're up late. I mean, if there's rain tomorrow, the internet still works, which means that we got to get that bid out, and there's a lot of things like that. That's like, there's not a lot of hurdles that can get in the way. If there's a deadline, you got to hit the deadline. Yeah. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of sitting down, closing the door sometimes, let's get this bid knocked out. On top of that, you can be going up against 9-10 customers. If your number's high, your number's high. You may not get looked at twice. And a lot of times that's where that relationship comes in, that you might get that feedback. But I'd love to educate the rest of the company more on that kind of stuff too,
If you could send a message out to, let's say, a foreman or even a pipe layer, right? What would you tell them?
If I want them to know anything, it's that I wake up every single day realizing that we got to take care of 400 families, and it starts with us in pre-con. I'm kind of getting goosebumps right now just thinking about it, because it means so much to me. I mean, I care about every single person here, and I really think about it all the time, and I think the rest of our team does too. It's a lot of weight to carry, because if we're not bringing in the bids, it doesn't matter how good anybody else is down the chain. None of it matters, if we're not bringing in the work, and that can be a burden, but it's a beautiful burden to get to carry. It's something I'm really proud of, and the rest of our team is too. So yeah, if there's anything, it's that we're doing our best for you guys every single day. I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's an honor to be able to do this and to play a part. And sometimes people look at it a different way when it's behind the desk, but it can be very taxing. And but again, we're just very humbled and honored to be in that position to be able to provide in that way. So
yeah, I think that's a good message to send out to the guys, and I think they would really appreciate that, right? Because a lot of times these guys, it's not that they are naive about it, it's just they get that perception of you're behind a desk, your job is easy, right? And that's not the truth, right? And the entire estimating team's job, fortunately, it's behind the desk, depending on how you want to look at it, right? Some guys have to be up and walking around, doing the labor work, right? Putting in the pipe in the ground, installing the utilities, right? Because that's what they're good at. They're skilled in it. They're professionals. That's their profession, right? It takes a guy to be out there 10 hours a day in the sun, right? Or, like midnight, right? You talk about, submitting a bid midnight. Sometimes we got to do night work, right? Because that's just what our traffic control plan, is playing out. Is that we have to close the road at night because of the traffic, right? But that's a good message. And I worked out in the field too, and it was, I didn't spend years and years doing it, but I think I spent enough time to where I knew that I wanted to make an impact, right? And the goosebumps that you get, I get too, but on a safety aspect. There's 400 guys rely on me to make sure that they go home safe, in a sense, right? I gotta make sure that we gotta keep building that culture that you build with your guys so that they can keep pushing out bids, right? So it's a chain effect. I mean, it's we got big blue machines now, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really unique. I think that's really cool. I think the guys are proud of seeing those machines. They get to operate a machine that's logoed and has these unique colors, because you see that blue machine out there, and there's not that many blue machines out there, man.
No,
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Well, I just want to take some time, say thank you. Appreciate you coming on board, sending out message, talking about a little bit about your history here at Moss, and, your overall impact to the company, because it's a lot of hard work goes unseen sometimes, right? And I think people do see it here. I think everybody's work here at Moss gets seen, right? And I think Garrett does a good job about recognizing that.
Well, I appreciate that a lot, man. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to get to work here every day and get to show up for everybody. And, again, man, I wouldn't trade it for the world. So I'm just very thankful, man.
I don't think I'll trade it either.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'll pass.
Yeah, right.
I'll pass.
Yeah.